It's Mo. So I just started a screen recording so that we can get this underway. I have been putting this video off for a while. I think I did almost the exact same last year where I made a video like this at the beginning of the year and then said I was going to make one halfway through and then put it off, and now it's August and I am now making this video. So what is this video, you might ask? This is my RAB Spreadsheet Check In for 2023. What is a RAB spreadsheet, you might ask? Well, RAB stands for Recently Acquired Books, and I have made a spreadsheet that categorizes, catalogs, keeps track of all my recently acquired books for the year. I started this in 2022, and I listed every single book that I brought in over the year, where it came from, how much it cost, if it cost anything, who it was by. When I read it, I marked it off. I was also keeping track of my total amount spent. I was also keeping track of how many books I read during that month and how many of those books came off the RAB spreadsheet. And I started adding things at the end of 2022 with the possibility that there would be even more things to track. So in 2023, I continued this process, and I also went through my existing TBR and made a sheet for that. We will discuss what features I kept, what features I abandoned, what I've been working on, my total spending for the year so far, and all that good stuff. But to start off, we're going to look at 2022. This is a completed spreadsheet for the most part because I am not currently adding any books to this spreadsheet. The spreadsheet is super simple. It's really easy. I have a list of numbers on the side, which corresponds with the books that I brought in, how many books I brought in. I have the date they were acquired, the title, the author, the location where I found the books, and the cost of the books, if anything, and then later I have month read. And I also have the total amount spent for the year, as well as the breakdown of expenditure throughout the months. I also have a hauled section or column in this spreadsheet to say when I hauled them, because while I was starting this process in 2022, I was doing haul videos for every month that I brought in books, so you could also see what the books were that I brought in on the channel. And then in this column, I also have the genres. There are some hidden columns in here, and in those hidden columns, some of those have like the genre and things like that. That was a feature that I had thought about adding in to the end of 2022 and all of 2023, but it never really took off. I just didn't really need it. That might be data that I collate or collect later. It doesn't really have anything to do with like bringing in the books. I thought it would be interesting to see how many genres, what's my most brought in genre, what's my most read genre. That's like bigger data that I might one day compile, but I don't need to fill in as we go. And then the last columns are the books that I've read each month. So we have 2022 here and how many books I read in each month. Under that, we have some data referencing or referring to 2022. Honestly, it's not even clear to me anymore what exactly this data is. And then we have where I started 2023. Now we're going to come back to this in a minute, but let's go ahead and look at our pre-2022 tab. I did try to go through my physical TBR and list every book I'd gotten before 2022 while I was working on 2023. And this was happening throughout the beginning of 2023, so it's not entirely accurate. It also doesn't have all of the same columns as the 2022 tab. So we have the number of books, we have the title, we don't have the date that I picked them up because that was so long ago, I don't know when that is. We have the author, we have the location, if I remember it, I stick it in there. We have the cost, if I remember it, I stick it in there. We have the month read. This obviously doesn't have a 2022 section because it was created after 2022. But what you'll notice is that there's a lot of like groupings of things. So in the very beginning here, we have 2 books that were read in January and listed as book 1 and 2 because those books I read as I was creating the spreadsheet. And the same thing happens later where you can see that there were books that were not added to the spreadsheet that I just didn't either capture, or I guess I didn't do a very good job of actually adding all my physical books. So there are quite a few here. And you can see these last ones that I've been been reading throughout August, I'm like, I'm pretty sure I got these in 2022, but they're not on my 2022 spreadsheet. So did I really get them before and I'm just blanking on it because, 2020 through 2022 seems like a total blur anyway. So, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect system. But we can move on to the 2023 sheet, and this has some interesting data. Number of books as I acquire them. We have the date acquired, we have the title, the author, the location, the cost. We also have the month read for each book. And then we can get on to some exciting things. Popping back to 2022. For the entirety of 2022, I spent $383.12 on books, and I brought in about 393 to 395 books. There's a couple books in here that are like missing or that I popped in later that I knew I bought, but somehow I didn't put them in my acquired. If we go back to 2023, it's only August, and I have already spent $421.78. And that is only $38.66 more than I spent in 2022, but it's only August. Like, I'm gonna spend more money than that. I have been trying really hard not to spend more money than that, and I have been trying very hard to be on a book acquiring ban. I will have a whole video about my thoughts on that, and I will leave that listed down below. How many books have I brought in? In 2022, what did I say? I brought in 395 books for the entire year, and already in 2023, I have brought in 359 books. So again, if we stopped here and I don't acquire any more books for the end of the year, I'm doing okay. I'm not doing great, but I didn't spend that much more, only about $40 more, and I've brought in less books overall. Yes, one of my goals going into 2023 was to bring in less books than in 2022, but I meant like a lot less, not just like 40 less. So I'm not doing great, but that's only if we stopped right here. I already know, and part of my book acquiring plan is to buy books at least 3 used book sales for the end of the year. So I probably acquire anywhere from 10 to 30 books at used book sales. So that is going to be quite a few more coming in, and it's going to be more money spent on books. So I'm not doing great with my goals. I'm not doing great with acquiring less books or spending less money on books. I am reading a lot of books. I still have the amount of books that I've read each month column and what I've read off the spreadsheet. And then another new feature for 2023, because now I have 3 different spreadsheets, pre-2022, 2022, and 2023, is that I've also started a totals from all of the sheets. So each individual sheet has how many books I've read during that month. For instance, in January, I read 2 off of the pre-2022 sheet. I read 8 off of the 2022 sheet, and I read 1 off of the 2023 sheet. So in my totals from all sheets section, you can see that I read 12 books for the month, and I read 11 of those books off of my recently acquired books spreadsheet. So if I have a book that's not from my recently acquired book spreadsheet, it might be one that was already existing on my shelf. It might be one that someone lent me. It might be an audiobook that I don't own. One of the things that I've been working on for 2023 is to read audiobooks that I do own physical copies of to try and get down my physical TBR. That's the basic overview of my spreadsheet. That is my stats for this year. I've spent about $40 more and acquired about 40 books less than in 2022 so far, but we're still going. We still have 4 months left of the year at least. So how do I feel about that? I think I feel okay about it since starting my book acquiring ban. I have acquired 2 books since starting that ban, and per the rules, I have unhauled 2 books from my physical TBR to correspond with the 2 books that I gained. So we're holding out till next month. The book sale that I want to go to starts the 10th of September, so I will be acquiring books then. I'm just trying to quell my book acquiring until then. I'm trying to remain calm, even though I want to go to used bookstores, even though I want to go to little free libraries, even though I want to look at the book sale website. I have not been doing those things, or if I have, I've been extremely selective with what I choose to bring home. One thing that has been bothering me about my 2022 sheet is it's just like very cluttered. It's very like visually hard to look at for me right now. And I think that's just because it's the second year that I've been using it. I've been using it for over a year and a half, and it really needs some, not revamping, but some revitalizing in my mind. One of the things about my RAB spreadsheet that I've found extremely useful and very exciting is that I use it all the time. I look at it every day. Sometimes that's because I have finished a book and I'm marking it off there. Sometimes that's because I'm adding books. But most of the time, honestly, I just look at it because I enjoy looking at it, and it helps me pick books that I might want to read in the future. It reminds me of the books that I have on my TBR. My physical TBR is like very vast right now. Again, I made a whole video about that. It's a lot, and there's a lot of places where books are, and it's hard to see everything. So looking at it on my recently acquired books spreadsheet is so much easier, and it really makes me think of books that I might want to read. But the 2022 sheet is getting a little bit intense. So what I want to do is I want to move the 2023 books that I've read onto a new column so that I can see it more clearly and so that they're at the top of the page. And I want to hide the books that I have already read. So I did some work off camera to get the 2022 area of this spreadsheet the way I want it. I ended up hiding everything that I had read or removed prior to 2023. A lot of the rows that were like my off category, my unhaul, or went to collections, or went to reference, or some other area. So this looks like way, way more manageable now. I can see everything that I read in 2022, which according to this is actually only 31 books, which makes sense because I've been reading from 3 spreadsheets now, as well as other books. Something that I noticed was like for January of 2022, I only have 8 books that I haven't read. For February of 2022, I have 15 books that I haven't read. Some months I have a lot. I think in September I still have a ton, but what I did was I went through every month, saw how many books I had out of each month. What would be fun is to create a little TBR or a little reading list for myself with books from those specific months. My 2022 reading list for the end of this year, hopefully to do in the end of this year, possibly to do in the beginning of 2024. 12 books I think is pretty doable, one from each month, and I also think that a lot of these books fit in with things that I have already going in the end of 2023. So I'm hoping I can get to these 12 books by the end of the year. So let's go through them really quick. In January, I had 8 books that I hauled in 2022, but I hadn't read yet, and the book that I picked to go on this list is Killfire by Christopher Farnsworth. I read Christopher Farnsworth's The President's Vampire a while ago, a long time ago. I only picked this up actually for my dad because he likes him, but my dad had already read this. I actually tried this in a try-a chapter, and I didn't get rid of it. I wanted to keep it, so I feel like this is a good choice, and I could read this next month for Sci-Fi September. I'm doing these in order of the months that they came out of, but this is probably not the order that I'm going to read it in. It just happens to be that this might be a book that I read very soon. February, I had 15 books that I'd hauled in 2022 left to read, and the book that I picked to put on this reading list is Love Medicine by Louise Erdrich. I haven't read any Louise Erdrich yet. That's shocking. I have 3 or 4 of her books. I should definitely be reading her. She's a Native American or Native Canadian author, and I'm really excited to get to her work. This one is, I think, the start of a trilogy, so I figured this was a good place to start. It's one of her most well-known books as well, and I figured I'd probably read this in November for Indigathon or Skoden. In March, I had 18 books that I hauled and haven't read yet, and I picked Wisteria Cottage by Robert M. Coates. I started reading this in 2022, I think for Horror Mayhem, and I did actually DNF this book. I got 53 pages in and DNF'd it. It just was reading a lot slower than I had anticipated, especially for a 194-page book. I love this cover. It's so beautiful. But I figured this would be a really good one to pick up and finish off of my DNF pile, because I would like to finish some of my DNFs before I do like a DNF video. This one I think I could probably read for Shorty September. In April, I had 37 books that I had hauled but hadn't read, and I thought a good one to read off of that list would be Palace of the Drowned by Christine Magnan. I picked it up in a little free library, but I have not even thought about it. I mean, I think about it, but I haven't attempted to pick it up, so I thought this would be a good one. This is also one that I was considering for a try-a chapter, so if I decide that I don't like this one, it might be an easy DNF as well. In May, I had 24 books still to read from 2022, and I picked Time to Be Earnest, a fragment of an autobiography by P.D. James, one of my all-time favorites mystery authors, and I was actually hoping to read this for Nonfiction November anyway. In June, I had 14 books unread. For this list, I chose Why Shoot a Butler by Georgette Heyer. I've never read any Georgette Heyer. She's known mostly, I think, for romance, but she did do some mystery as well. I don't think she's technically a Golden Age mystery writer. I think she's a little bit later. Oh no, Golden Age. This was first published in 1933, so you know I love me a Golden Age mystery author. Maybe I'll read that anytime between now and December. In July, I had 22 books left to read, and I picked Thousand Cranes by Yasunari Kawabata. I read my first Yasunari Kawabata earlier this year. It was called Snow Country, and this one just seemed like a good follow-up. I wanted to read more of his writing anyway, and this one is like very, very short. In August, I had 19 books left to read, and I picked Honey Girl for this list by Morgan Rogers. I've tried to read this one a couple of times or put it on a couple of TBRs, but I've never actually gotten to it. This is like a women's fiction, coming of age, also love story. This is another one though that if I decide I can't read it, or if I decide I don't want to read it, I maybe will just read a couple chapters and then I'll haul it. Another book that I tried in a try-a chapter and decided to keep is Murder at Hotel 11, and I picked this book for the list from September. In September, I had 44 books that are still unread from 2022. That's a lot of books. This is a relatively short one, but since I did it as a try-a chapter, it's probably a good idea to actually read it. In October, I had 34 books, so not very much better than September, and I decided to read Florida, so I have to read this one anyway for my TBR spin. This was like an extra TBR spin book, and I really do want to get to it. I read the first 2 short stories in this book already, but I was doing way better in November because I only have 10 books left from November 2022 that I need to read, and I picked Ace for this list because I've been saying that I wanted to read Ace forever. I read the first chapter of this book, I think in April, and then I was going to read it in May, and then I was going to read it in June for Pride Month, and I still haven't gotten to it, so this definitely needs to go on the list. I could read this in November for Nonfiction November or anytime. Finally, another doubled up prompt from December, The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, and I had 20 books that I'd hauled that month that I haven't read yet, so I think this is a good pick for this list. This is also on my 22 books I found out about in 2022 that I want to read in 2023 list, which I have not been making very much progress on, despite having several of the books. And again, I could read this next month in September for Sci-Fi September or anytime. So that's basically my overview of my RAB spreadsheet. That's the direction that my RAB spreadsheet's going. I talked a little bit about some goals that I have for the end of the year. I will definitely be continuing a spreadsheet like this, probably pretty much exactly the same in 2024, although I definitely need to be paring down the amount of books that I bring in, the amount of recently acquired books in 2024. Hopefully my book buying ban and reading things off my shelves instead of bringing in new books, and this book list that I've created of 2022 recently acquired books will help me get my TBR under control. Get ready for 2024, and we will definitely check in the beginning of the year to see how I'm doing with all that, to see what my 2024 RAB spreadsheet looks like. Let me know if you keep track of your books like this. Let me know if you keep a spreadsheet of what you bring in. Let me know if you write down what you bring in somehow or keep track of what you bring in. I would love to know in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!